your role? And what of our complex language? Is this also being used to trick us, and if so, why? Darren hints at a truth that must remain hidden. Where might God or the devil fit in? Do men control them too? I suppose humans could live together peacefully for everyone's benefit. Only joking. Darren runs a highly insightful website, which is all the W's, alternativeanswers.net. Well worth a visit. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darren DeOjee.
That's one of the best introductions I've ever had, actually, so I hope I can follow up on that. Thank you for such a considered and thought-out statement there. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see so many familiar faces and so many new ones. I've had a bit of a challenge presented to me tonight, and that is I've got to try and stand behind this podium. Now, I'm somebody who usually wanders about all over the place, those of you that have seen me before, so if you see me gripping onto this for dear life, it's to try and stop me from moving about too much. But I'll be using this whiteboard a lot, so I will be moving back and forth. I hope none of you get too dizzy. Can everybody hear me okay before I start? Yeah? People at the back nodding? Excellent. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the clear yes at the back there, John. Okay, so I chose tonight's title and the sort of leaning that I was going to give this talk based on what I saw was the other sort of talks that were going on at this particular New Horizons group. So I wanted to make it a bit kind of hard-hitting and challenging. How do people feel? Does anybody have anything like to say about what brought them here tonight and about what motivated them to turn up, or are you all just quite regulars here? Does anybody have anything they want to say?
We all came especially to see you.
Oh, thank you, Albert. I've got to give them a cheque for that later. Thank you. Okay, I've got a couple of things I want to say before I get into tonight's subject matter. So first of all, a bit about myself. Tonight we're going to be looking at one of my core subjects, which is about the power of language and how it's used to control and mislead us, but how it's done in a very, very obvious way. But it's staring us all right in our faces, which hopefully after tonight you'll get a sense of that. But it's not the only subject that I do. I do a lot of events which are a bit unusual. You know, you wouldn't normally come along to something like this to hear specifically about language and how it can help us in our emancipation, our empowerment and our freedom. But it's actually an essential thing for us to understand, just as I believe are the other subjects that I pay attention to, which are all things which are so fundamental to our everyday getting about in the world that we don't pay attention to how much power is in them. So I do work on sound, language, perception, gender, relationships, and social interaction. Now these are things that you all engage in every single day, often without even thinking about it. You take your ability to perceive, to hear, to speak, to interact as granted, and none of us actually really pay as much attention to those things as we should. Now tonight I'm going to go a little bit into it, but hopefully give you some hints as to how much insight may lie through that door if you are willing to go through it. Now, the other thing I wanted to say was, isn't 2011 turning out to be quite amazing? Have people not found that? Yeah. I found the energies to be moving about this year to be quite unlike anything I have seen to date. Now I have seen manifestation happen in times which are staggering, things just appearing in people's lives. On the contrary as well, things just disappearing. And also, I think most importantly, is the way we are all being challenged. Where, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for you guys, but certainly most of the people I have encountered or who are in my life over recent months have been facing some pretty sharp challenges. But the theme seems to be the same through all of them. It doesn't matter what the challenge is, it seems to be a whittling process is taking place. We're being asked to drop that stuff that we know we shouldn't really still be carrying around. Has everybody kind of encountered that a little bit? And I think if we embrace that that's actually what's going on, that that's the question that's being asked, then we can actually face these obstacles quite easily simply by acting on our knowledge. And I think the other kind of message that goes hand in hand with that is, it's a bit of a grow-up message, I think, that's hitting humanity a bit, and each of us individually, where we're hanging on to our old habits, a bit like, young kids with their dummies, and we're holding on saying, no, it's mine, I'm going to keep a hold of it. And really the universe has been telling us for years often that we really need to be putting some of these things down. And I mean, only you will know about those things manifesting in your life, but I'm certainly seeing a few nods in the audience that show that other people are sharing that experience. Now, the reason that I mention that is because obviously loads of talks go on at things like New Horizons, festivals, all sorts of places about 2012. I mean, has everybody here been to a talk about 2012 at some point? Or have you heard about it in some way?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single no in the house. Now, all this emphasis, all this future planning, all this thinking about what's going on then, I've seen quite a lot of people that are metaphorically sitting about with their boxes of popcorn waiting for the show to take place. And I think that that's a massive mistake. A massive mistake, because the challenges that we're being presented with now are the ones which are deciding who we are aligning with, who we are converging with, and who we are diverging from. So some people we are meeting with and we're forming new networks, other people we're separating from, but it's all based on our choices. And we're all being asked to choose based on all the wonderful information and knowledge you get given every week at places like this. How much would you actually act on? Not all of it's very easy to act on. How much of it do you think you should act on? Some of it doesn't need to be acted on. But really, I think we're in a position now where there's so much coming at us that it's almost a demand to choose. Because the choices we make this year and the actions we take this year are what will decide where we land when 2012 does come along. So I actually think between now and then is far, far, far more important than then. Because where you are then is going to be determined by what you do between now and then. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. But I think it's an incredible time to be alive. There's a lot of joy and peace and great things happening in many people's lives, despite all the increasing oppression that comes along. And I think that's also a product of people choosing well. You know, and I think most of you will have had a taste of that in some way as well, otherwise you probably wouldn't be at events like this. So, all of that aside, there's kind of, I've noticed, because I've been doing these talks for a lot of years now, and I've noticed that there are both benefits to this mass awakening that's taking place, but there's also a cost. There's a cost to so many of us becoming awakened and empowered and having realizations and all the rest of it. And that is that so many people want to talk about it, they want to get up and share with the world and all the rest of it, but then it makes it very difficult for each of us to filter through what we're presented with. There's a great kind of increasing sense of information overload taking place. You know, there's very few places you can turn now without being bombarded by a whole new area that you may not have heard of before, but you're basically being told, oh, did you know it's hitting the fan there as well? Oh, did you know there's something bad happening over here too? And it just keeps on stacking up. And I think rather than continuing to expose ourselves to all these messages of great overarching powers pressing down upon you, instead of that, I think we really need to be asking how much of it is relevant, how much of it is important. Because just because something is true, it doesn't mean it's relevant, and it doesn't mean it's important. And making that insightful choice, being able to look at it and say, is this really that important? Is this really going to help me on my journey? I mean, tonight we're going to be talking a lot about things which are pointless. And it's quite an interesting thing, because there's a lot of these things that we're hearing about these days that actually, they're great, they're information, they're true, but they don't really take us anywhere. They don't lead us anywhere. They just give us another piece of information to add to our in-tray. And hopefully tonight, what I'm choosing to share with you, so I'm much more selective in the talks that I give now, because I used to give a range of about 40 or 50 talks, but I've stripped it down now just to make it easier for people, because I want to use the very, very short period of time I have with you to talk about things which I feel are important and which are relevant, and not to waste your time with pointless things. So hopefully I will achieve that, so with the stated intention out of the way. So I just want to check, in terms of all this awareness stuff that's going on, I just want to see how much everybody had heard stuff about. So money scandal and money rip-offs and stuff like that. How many people have had some insight into that? There's something going on with the money system. Okay, there's a lot of hands going on in here. Okay, money system's one. What about government oppression, sort of an increasing criminalisation of the average member of the populace? Not as many hands for this one. Okay, because that's very subjective, isn't it? Very subjective. We'll look at a few of the symbols for that later. What about Codex Alimentarius and the chemicalisation of food?
Yeah.
That's quite a scary one, isn't it? Brilliant.
That's starting to bite now.
Sorry, it is starting to bite, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Chemtrails, anyone? Chemtrails? Yeah.
That's
okay.
starting to bite as well.
Yeah. Free man and the sovereign movement, all about how laws are used to make us less than the state. Yeah, lots of hands going up. Vaccines and big pharma.
Yep.
Yeah. Fluoride and chlorine in the water to fry your brain. Brilliant. Okay.
Destroy initiative.
Sorry?
Destroy your initiative.
Absolutely, yes. Alien cover-ups, alien interventions, all this sort of stuff, yeah. History rewrites, Masonic control.
Yeah.
What a list, isn't it? Now, for the number of people that stuck their hands up for every single one of those, what a busy head you must have. How much of that is swirling around in there? And, you know, you wander around the supermarket, terrified to buy anything because you don't know what's being done by Codex, terrified to speak to police because you're scared they're going to just try and get money out of you, and we're just being made afraid of everything that we're turning around to face.
Nah, we've got no fear.
Well, that's all right for people like Albert in his position of having no fear, but there are some who do feel fear in the face of it, and it's not fear that they're feeling, it's a sense of helplessness, or a bit of maybe even helplessness leading to hopelessness to an extent. And I think that's something we have to be very, very careful of as a side effect to all this awakening. Because how many times do you watch these films on the internet or whatever and you hear people saying, here's what they're going to do in a few years, RFID chip, in a few years this, in a few years that, in a few years this. Now, if you get millions of divinely mandated, incredible human beings to all think about all this stuff manifesting, all you've done is increase the odds of it.
Yeah.
So all you've done is increase the chances of it actually happening. And this is what I mean about choosing well what you choose to align with this year, because with all that manifestation magic that's happening around us, I would say 2011 is definitely the year to be very, very careful with both your spoken and your unspoken desires. Because from what I've seen, they can just pop right up there. So it's just a note of caution in what you do with this incredible mind that you have and these incredible emotions, and choose what you spend them on. And what we're going to do tonight is hopefully have a look at some stuff that can help you manage that boundary and stop yourself being affected by some of this stuff that's trying to pull at your attention. Okay, so obviously the stuff that I've mentioned are all big issues. There's talks going on about them every week across the country. There's lots of interest in them. Rooms are filled with people like yourselves coming along to find out more. But again, how relevant is it all and how important? You know, how much of it is actually going to lead us to where we want to be? Because how would you all feel if I told you that all of that stuff is the bottom rung of the ladder of control? It's just the most obvious. It's the physical. It's right in front of you. It's the final layer. All the other work has been done. And I invite you to consider that for a moment, because it's quite a bold statement that all this stuff is just the wrapping up of the package that's already been constructed over not just hundreds, but thousands of years. And it's just a smokescreen. So that as people become more mentally awakened, they are absolutely and utterly bombarded on all sides with distraction. So that you cannot get a grip of your mind to use it for what you can really do with it. Because all it takes is a few of us to learn that and master that, and it will be job done. But for the side you all really want to be on, rather than the side we all come and hear about all the time. So obviously, for those of you that have been looking at a lot of these subjects that I've already mentioned, they're all very complex, aren't they? There's a lot in them. Some of them have been getting formed over decades, some of them even longer. And as you turn, excuse me, as you turn your attention to each of them, you can become lost in months of research. Has everybody noticed that? Yeah? Everybody here on the internet? How many? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, just, you know, as we go through tonight, I'll be talking a lot more about language, but I invite you all to consider the fact that it's not a mistake that we call it the web. It's not an accident that it's called the net. And I bet you'd all like to think you're the Spider-Man, the spider and the fisherman. I'd be willing to place money on the other side of the coin. that by all of us spending all these hours on there, we are the fly, we are the fish. Because what used to happen was, people would come and meet and do things like this, but then they would have energy to then go and act. What happens today is, people go and vent on a forum. Ah, that's better, I feel better after that. Brilliant. I'm going to have a cup of tea. Thinking our work is done. All we've done is outletted all that energy that could have been channeled into some activity to bring about change. How many people read forum posts from a year ago? Nobody does. Anybody here sit and spend hours crafting forum posts to share your knowledge and wisdom with the world? I have in the past. I don't anymore. Because they disappear, like yesterday's news. So again, it's about choosing how you spend your time. Because I know one thing is for sure, I get lost on the internet quite easily. I can sometimes find myself sitting there and I find myself watching a good YouTube video, but then I spend 20 minutes reading inane, banal comments, and I've giggled away to myself, and then I'm like, oh, I've just spent half an hour reading rubbish. So it's just things like this. Time is definitely the precious commodity, I think, for this year. And so I just invite you all to choose what you do with your time. So anyway, all of this state stuff has come in to create a mental maze. One that we could run around in for years and years and years and think that we're freeing our mind. But we're not. We're just teaching it to run in circles, and what we do is, if you imagine that our reality has walls and a ceiling, all we're doing with all this freeing your mind stuff and getting all this new stuff is, we're making the walls bigger and the ceiling higher, but the walls are still there and the ceiling's still there. And tonight we're going to delve into having a look at the structure of those walls and the structure of that ceiling and how it actually works. And hopefully you'll all get a small insight into the fact that it's very complex, but it's very obvious as well. So, all this state stuff, the state control has been obviously building up over many, many, many years. It's really, really gone gung-ho in the last sort of 1,000 years with states forming all over the globe to, on the positive side, provide service, create infrastructure and all the rest of it. On the negative side, to gradually affect control and a diminished responsibility in the populace, which is the state we're at today. People have such a sense of diminished responsibility that most of us in here will have had at least a few times in our life where we don't even know what we want to eat next. You know, we're going around there, I don't know what I want, you know. Because our decision-making capacity has been so whittled away from us because we've given all that authority to others to make those decisions for us that we've forgotten how to make proper decisions. And it's a key thing. How many of us, you know, I'm certainly bad for it. I might faff around for ages before I make a decision on something. Because that sharpness, that acuity that is only developed with practice has been robbed of us. So anyway, the states come in and they've done all this great stuff by giving us all these comfy benefits and comfy services to lull us into a nice sense of security and to also de-skill us so we no longer know how to provide food for ourselves, we no longer know how to deal with conflict resolution and things like that in our communities anymore, because that's all been, you know, farmed off. And, well, that's, you all know what the state's done. I thought I could sit and talk about that for ages, couldn't I? But I'm not going to. We're short on time tonight. So, the work of the state is interesting, but only as a smokescreen, because it was done on the back of some already even more incredible work achieved by the church. Now, if you go up against the state, the worst thing that can happen to you is, yeah, a few policemen might rough handle you, you might spend a bit of time inside, you might get a fine or two, something like that, but that's pretty much the worst. Back then, you didn't agree with the church, you were burned, you were tortured, your kids got waterboarded, your family got abused and ostracised. That's a lot more hardcore, a lot more. The work of the state was built on the back of a broken, spirited European humanity. They'd already had a lot of their spirit and their energy bashed out of them. The rest of the work was easy after that. So what we're going to look at tonight is how the church achieved what they did, why they did it, and how it actually works, because it really, really isn't obvious at all. And that's why I talk about the rest of the stuff being a smokescreen. So, where do we start with such a thing? Let me just check my notes, which were rapidly scribbled on the train on the way here.